Welcome to Don't Be Caged by Your Age, Richard Eisenberg. I'm so happy you're here to share how you are shattering age-related expectations. How you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me.
Please let listeners know where you hail from and how many years the world has enjoyed the gift of your presence.
Well, thank you. I am in New Jersey and I am 68 years old.
Okay, listeners, you got two classic 1956 models here, all right?
Good. Great to you.
Thank you. It's a great age. It's great to be 68.
Mhm.
Listeners, I'm so thrilled to share Richard with you. He's a fantastic example of what it means to embrace unretirement. So let me just take a few moments of your time to share a little bit about Richard's background. After an impressive career, including top roles like executive editor at Money Magazine, front page finance editor at Yahoo, special projects director, money editor at Good Housekeeping, and managing editor and money work editor at PBS's Next Avenue, which was a site dedicated to people 50 and over. Richard stepped away in 2022, but retirement didn't mean slowing down. He shares today his wisdom in the View from Unretirement column for Market Watch, and he freelances for major outlets like Next Avenue, Fortune, AARP, and more. He's also a teacher guiding others through unretirement with an NYU masterclass, and he co hosts the fabulous Friends Talk Money podcast. It's been around for 6 years, folks. Richard, I can't wait to dive into your insights about unretirement and how you're thriving in this exciting chapter of life. And did you ever think we'd be talking about this chapter of our life as being exciting?
I must say, I did not think about that years ago, but in the past few years, I've been thinking more about that. I do feel like this is a really great chapter of our lives if we take advantage of it.
So let's begin though by having you share one wild, surprising story from your lived experiences, just to give listeners a flavor of who you are and where you've been.
Well, thank you. Yeah, as you say, I've had a long career in journalism as a writer and editor. Maybe the most wild story that comes to mind is when I was at Money Magazine in the 1980s, I invented their best places to live in America survey, which goes on now every year from them. But the first year we did it, we listed all 300 places that we looked at and we rank order them all. And of course, somebody's going to be 300. That year happened to be Flint, Michigan. And the people in Flint, Michigan were not happy about that. And they actually burned Money Magazine. And I remember seeing that in the movie that Michael Moore did about Flint. So that, I guess, would be the wildest story that I can think of.
Oh, oh my gosh. Listeners, you probably get that article popping up all the time, best cities to live in. And I know you cheer wildly if it's any city that you're in or from or know or in beloved. So how cool is it, Richard, that you were part of that origin story? Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
So here you are. We call this the Renaissance years, 55 to 80. And I'd love to know, Richard, what inspired you to focus on topics like unretirement, ageism, and financial planning for folks over 60?
I think because I've been writing and editing about personal finances since I was in my 20s. And so when I started out, I was mostly writing for people in their 30s and 40s. I would say a little bit people in their 20s, but most people in their 20s weren't paying too much attention. But then as I got into my 50s and then 60s, I found that there were other topics that I wanted to explore that I was living, that friends of mine were living. And then we started having to think about things like Medicare, Social Security, and taking money out of our 401ks and all that sort of thing. And those are complicated issues for a lot of people. And there aren't that many people writing about them. So I felt like, well, maybe I could be helpful.
That's wonderful. We hear a lot about how us baby boomers have not really planned for retirement. Is that still true?
It's true for some of them, but not for all of them. It's hard to
Okay.
generalize. If you look at the numbers, there are some people who have not saved very much for retirement. That's true. But then there are others who've done a very good job of it. And most of them have been lucky enough to work at employers that have 401ks and they've been putting money
Right.
into them for many years. So it kind of depends. I would say for self-employed people, many of them have had a harder time, often because they just need to put money back into the business, or they forget about putting money away for retirement because there's nobody forcing them to do it.
That's right. And a lot of times the money, the asset, the retirement nest egg is their home. They may have paid off their home, and that doesn't necessarily show up on a marketable security spreadsheet or a 401k, et cetera. You use this word unretirement a lot. So, how did that happen, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I first heard of it from a writer who used to write for me at Next Avenue named Chris Farrell. He wrote a whole book called Unretirement. He's a great writer and a friend of mine. And what he meant by it is the idea of not retiring in the traditional sense where you've left your full-time job and now you're not working anymore and it's a life of leisure, which for some people is the way they want the retirement to be. But for other people like me, it's not. And for us, it means working part-time in retirement when you want to, with the people you want to, saying no to some people that you don't want to work with, and doing it where you want to. So it's basically doing it the way you would like to do it and giving yourself time to do things that you couldn't do when you had a full-time job. For me, for a lot of people, that's volunteering, it could be mentoring, can be traveling, spending more time with friends and family. That's my definition of unretirement.
Absolutely. And I get very excited about this time period because the responsibilities are less. You're not worried about providing for your family so much anymore. You have the freedom and flexibility to try new things, make quote mistakes. I don't believe in mistakes. You
Mhm.
just learn what you don't want to do and what you do want to do. But
Mhm.
you can try different things. And I think it's a very exciting time. And I know that you had to try something new and different by launching a podcast. This is audio. You've been a writer forever. What was it like to learn how to manage the mic and be part of a conversation with other co-hosts that you had to do and pull all of that technology together and have a podcast? And friends and listeners, the podcast is called Friends Talk Money. And Richard and his co-host tackle critical financial topics for older adults. And it's been around 6 years and 10 seasons. And may I just say, as a seasoned podcaster and serial podcaster since 2012, I'm getting out the clappers for you right now and just sharing wildly. That level of consistency of delivering really good content is not easy. So take us on that journey. What was it like to
Uh-huh.
launch it?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I first started doing it when somebody I knew named Pam Kruger, who started a company called Wealth Ramp. What they're all about is helping people find financial advisors. She came to me and she said, well, she wanted to start a new podcast of personal finance advice for people over 50. And would I co-hosted with her, and I said, "Sure." And then she brought in another co-host who's also excellent, named Carrie Savage, who your audience may know. She's written many books about personal finances. She does a syndicated column about that. But as you say, it was developing a new skill for me because I mostly have been writing using my fingers at the computer and not speaking so much. And so you learn to do things differently when you're podcasting. You have to, I'd say, be coherent, but also abbreviated. So you want to make your points, but also give the other co-hosts and the guests, if you have them, time for them to make theirs and have a good conversation, chat back and forth.
In looking back over the 6 years, do you have a favorite topic, a favorite episode that listeners went crazy over or you went crazy over?
Well, there are a few that we've done recently that I really like. One was about creating what I call a retirement resume. And this is the idea of if you want to work part-time in retirement, you may, find it hard to get hired due to age discrimination. But one way you can deal with that is to update your resume, which you may not have done in 20 or 30 years, but also shrink it to the point where it really focuses on what you've been doing recently and what you're good at and what you want to be doing. And also you want to update your LinkedIn profile and all that. So we talked a lot about retirement resumes. And another one we did recently was with an author named Christine Benz, that's Benz. She has a new book that's terrific, all about how to retire. And she interviewed a lot of smart people with their retirement tips. And we had her talk about what she heard from her people.
I love this. Listeners, are we not loving all the great advice that we're getting for books to read? All new books for not only the bookshelf, but for my Kindle. This is so wonderful. We're chatting with Richard Eisenberg. And specifically, we're talking about his phenomenal podcast, Friends Talk Money. And you can see in the banner going across, those of you who are watching the video, but those of you listening, visit friendstalkmoney.org to find all the ways that you can grab the gems from this wonderful podcast and subscribe to the podcast. And the resume part is so important because a lot of times, yes, we are up against ageism, Richard, in such a significant way that we need to sort of reframe ourselves from being an employee into being a consultant who is bringing wisdom, expertise, and you're going to make a lot more money, folks, and not have to work as many hours. Is that what you learned from Christine and from talking about retirement resumes?
Yeah, and that's very true. It is possible. I think for a lot of us who've been working for so many years, we could have a resume that goes on for 5 pages because we've worked so long, often in many places doing lots of different things. But employers don't want to see that much. So they want you to cut to the chase and really tell them, well, what have you done lately? And what are you really good at? And don't tell me about something you did in the 1980s, even though it might have been a very important job and you may have loved it. So you have to, sort of trim that on your own and play up what you've been doing. And what you've been doing may be volunteering. It may be other kinds of things you've done that you may not think of as work, but they actually include skills that can be very important when you're looking for paid work. So don't minimize those.
Right. I think that's such great advice, Richard. And folks, you can hop on Canva for free, canva.com, and create anything that you want. You can check out maybe someone's media kit and use that as an example of how to just sort of bring in your expertise and how you can help in a bullet form, a paragraph plus couple of bullet items for potential companies that might hire you. And remember, it's your expertise, it's your lived experiences that you're bringing. And we learned this from Jeanette Liardi and many other folks that companies do so much better when they have intergenerational employees. You got to have the older brain and you got to have the younger brain and working together. And we have found through the data that companies are more profitable and higher revenue when they're having that level of diverse intergenerational teams working for them. So, Richard, and you know this from talking about it all the time with your focus on retirement. Many pre-retirees and then retirees are struggling to find their footing when it comes to pursuing passion and purpose. We talk about, passion and purpose a lot. And oftentimes they've been counting the days to retirement and not giving any thought to, well, I could end up living another 30 years. What am I going to do? And this is why we have illnesses that happen and we have earlier dementia because the brain shuts down, the body shuts down, the connections aren't there. What advice would you give to someone feeling uncertain about how to begin, where to begin this journey of exploration? Because it's self exploration that they have to do. And that's not always easy.
You're absolutely right. And I agree with everything you just said. I will say that what I've learned in the articles I've written and edited is that many people think a lot about what they want to retire from. And they want to leave the job. They're burned out. They don't like the people they're working with, their boss, whatever it may be. They don't think too much about what they're going to retire to, or as Robert Laura, who runs the Retirement Coaches Association, told me, they don't think about what they want to retire with. And that means, so what are you going to take with you into retirement that will give you satisfaction and purpose and meaning? And what do you want to do with your days? Now, you don't need to know everything before you leave your full-time job. And you're going to change as you get into this period of your life. But it's a good idea to have a rough idea of what you think you want to do. How much time do you want to spend working and volunteering, and where do you want to be doing this? And then you'll, tweak it as you go along. You may find, well, gee, I'm working more than I really want to, or thought I would want to, or not as much as I want to. But it can be very scary when you first start out to be looking at a blank calendar, because we're so used to knowing what our days are going to be like because there are meetings that are scheduled for us or jobs we know we've got to get done. And now it's all up to us. And I find that a little scary, but also very freeing. It's exciting to say, well, I'll decide what I'm going to do today, but then it's up to you to also actually make that happen too.
And you brought up a really good point, Richard, which is you and I mean, You've been on the freelancing side for a while. I've been unemployable since 1992. So we've learned how to be self directed. We've learned how to make something out of nothing. But have deep appreciation, listeners, for those of you who have been an employee your entire life. This transition period is really tough. You need to sort of grieve and have that time period. I think Wendy Leggett talked about this, about how we need to really honor those years as an employee and then have the period of time of just sort of being in that messy middle. And then you're ready to think about what you want to do next. And it's such an important time. But find the people, find the resources. There's so many great resources out there, whether it's book or, as I'm always saying, anything you need to solve, you can find on YouTube.
Mm.
There's a video for that, but also we have resources at don'tbecagedbyyourage.com that you can tap into as well. And do not hesitate to do two things. One, your mental health is so important. Hire a therapist. And Medicare, if you have any supplemental insurance along with Medicare, will take care of that for you. And be sure to reach out to any of the social services for folks over 60. Be sure to just take good care of yourself. You have written a lot, Richard, on finance. And full disclosure, everybody, Richard's not a financial advisor. He's not here to give you any financial advice. So let's just get that out of the way. But because you write some pretty pragmatic ideas and thoughts for folks over 60, can you share a few mindset tactics or ways to look at our finances after 60 with the listeners?
Sure. Well, it's a good time to take stock of where you are financially. And you may be able to do that on your own, but it's often good to do it with a financial advisor because they will have a second set of eyes, but also they do this for a living. And so they may know more about certain things than you do. And it could be about investments, it could be about taxes, insurance, whatever it might be. So I would say if you don't have a financial advisor, it may be good to find one to sort of see, well, how am I doing? What should I be focused on? How can I fix problems that I might have? It could be debt. It could be not saving or investing enough. It could be insurance, whatever it may be, and sort of know what you need to be focused on. Some people get a little frightened about investing and they have sort of stayed away from it. Maybe they've done it through their 401k where it's done for them essentially. But if you're now, on your own, you still want to be putting some money into the stock market, even though you're older. I know traditionally the advisors have said as you get older, you want to have less money in the stock market and more in bonds and cash. And I think that makes sense overall. But I also think if you look long term, the stock market has done very well for people. Not every year. There are always going to be some years that are terrible. But I would say, don't think that just because you're in your 60s or 70s or 50s, that means you need to stop putting money into the stock market. I don't think you should. But you also don't have to be picking individual stocks either. You could be putting money into an index fund that buys the entire stock market. And you don't have to worry about which stocks are going to be the best
Okay.
ones right now because they're buying them all. And so if the market goes up, you go up. If the market goes down, you'll go down.
Right. Thank you for that. And Richard, given the exciting lived experiences you've had. I mean, you've accomplished so much as a journalist, as an author, and podcast host. What is next for you? What are you seeing on the horizon? What new projects, initiatives are you getting ready to explore?
Well, as you mentioned, I teach this master class in unretirement. I've done that for NYU now for this will be my third year. And in the past I've done it's 6 weeks virtually, open to anybody. And this year they've asked me to do two of them, one in the summer and one in the fall. So I'm looking forward to doing it twice. And the way I like to do this is I talk to the students who typically are in their 50s and 60s. Some of them are not yet retired, some of them are, but they're all sort of thinking about, well, what's this next stage going to be? And I try to help them sort of think about all the things that they ought to be thinking about. And then every session, I bring in an expert, a guest for about 15 minutes. And they're often authors of books. One of my favorite is a guy named Steve Lopez, who wrote a wonderful book called Independence Day. And Steve is a journalist at the Los Angeles Times. And when he was in his, I'd say, mid 60s, a few years ago, he was wondering, well, should I retire? Can I retire? And he didn't know. And so he spent a year reporting it out, just like good reporters do. and he talked to a lot of people. And the book is about his how he decided what to do. And he ultimately came out, decided to do kind of what I'm doing now, which is he's working part time. He's still doing it at the Los Angeles Times, but not all the time. And he's very happy continuing to do that because that's part of his identity, but also having the time to go to his daughter's tennis tournaments and things like that. So I'm looking forward to the master class. I'll be speaking to a group called the Change Makers. The University of Colorado has this wonderful program for people in their 50s and 60s who are thinking about their next chapter. And every year they're nice enough to ask me to speak to them virtually. So I'll be doing that soon. And then I try to go every year to the American Society on Aging conference because I want to always keep learning about what's happening, what's new in aging. And so this year it's going to be in Orlando. I'm going to be moderating a panel there all about unretirement with Chris Farrell, who I mentioned before, but also with Carrie Hannon, another terrific writer and expert on getting older and aging and working. And it's
Yeah,
very
we've had her on the podcast. She was like episode 4. She's wonderful.
she's terrific, an old friend of mine. And Suri Kaluri with TIAA, who does a lot of great research about retirement. So I'm looking forward to going to that, partly to do that panel, but mostly to learn from other people. So I keep up and write about the things that I learned for my readers.
Well, can I just say how excited I am because I shall be there as well. So
Oh,
I'm going to
really?
be able to we're going to be able to hug in real life, Richard.
Yeah. And a
Yay.
cup of coffee's there. You and me and Mickey Mouse.
Oh my gosh. And I love the Steve Lopez.
There's so many good books about retirement, retirement planning, and some of them are financial, but many of them are not. And I would say, for your audience, if they're sort of a little trepidatious, if they're a little concerned about, this next journey, there's lots of books. You mentioned YouTube, but there's also lots of books and websites that can help you as you're trying to figure it out. Don't do it yourself.
And can someone sign up for your course? Your master class?
Absolutely.
Because having just spoken about that, like keep pulling on threads, everybody, and look for resources. There you are. You have a virtual master class for folks. So there's really nothing better than to have someone help guide you through the process, Richard. How do folks sign up for the course?
You just go online to NYU's lifelong learning area and you'll see it. I'm not sure yet if they've started to take registration for the summer and fall. They might, but if they haven't, I would say check back in a few months as we get closer to those months. And I would love to talk to some of your audience and help them out. And one of the things I always do is see how the students can help each other, because I find that people who are going through this stage have a lot of good ideas for each other, or they can say, I tried that, it didn't work, but and somebody else can say, well, what about this? And so we can all learn from each other. There's a support group online for men called Chapter X. I don't know if you've ever had the founder of that. His name is Michael Kay. And it's a really great group for men primarily, I'd say in their 60s, who are sort of struggling with, I would say sometimes, but just dealing with the transition to retirement. And, men, generally speaking, aren't as good about talking about these kind of things to other people as women tend to be. So I was glad that he created this group, and they meet every month online, and he writes a blog, he does a podcast. And so I feel like there's lots of groups like that. You can probably find one, or you can start one.
I think that's wonderful what Michael's doing, because for men, a couple of things come up. One is sometimes they don't want to try new things because they want to win,
Yeah.
and they have to start in the beginner mode. And two, it's the discrimination that they're experiencing, probably for many of them the first time in their life. We women, we've been dealing with sexism in the workplace, and you name it in the workplace. And now we get hit with ageism. We're like, oh, great, one more thing. But I've seen a lot of white men who are reaching the age of 60 and older. They're bumping up against this ageism. And it's the first time they've really been up against that particular discrimination. And it's one that we keep needing to talk about. And I love that Michael is providing this support group for men specifically. That's so powerful. I gotta tell you, there's no moss growing on you, Richard. You have your fingers in everything. And listeners, if you want to know more about this great conference on aging, I will have links in the show notes, because this is a wonderful resource for you to go and meet terrific people who are shattering related expectations and stereotypes and providing resources on every single level on how you can thrive after 65. You may recall in episode 41, Sarah Freeman Smith, who lost her vision when she was 50. Boom, she's wearing the Ray-Ban Meta glasses and she's thriving at 70, able to create video content and photos, all the state-of-the-art technology you're going to find at this event on aging. So I'll have the links in the show notes. Richard, how can folks work with you, learn from you, follow you, and stay in touch with you?
Well, thank you. Well, they can certainly find me on LinkedIn. That's easy enough. I always post every story that I've written there and podcasts that I've done so they can find what I'm doing that way. I also like to write about on LinkedIn, post about other articles and podcasts that I've seen or heard that I think people should know about. On Market Watch, you can find me in the retirement channel there. You can just put my name in retirement and you'll see all the pieces I've done there. If you're interested in Medicare, I write about that for fortune.com, and they have an area called Aging Well on their website. So you can find those.
Excellent. Well, Medicare, Social Security, prescription drugs, we're up against some interesting times with that. And we want to come together as a collective community to make sure we stay protected with the money that we work so hard to save and contribute to our future retirement days. I just love how you are crushing ageism everywhere you go. Listeners, what are your thoughts? Please leave your comments on Don't Be Caged by Your Age's LinkedIn or Instagram feeds or on the website. And we're here to support each other. So, help each other figure out how to thrive after 65 and really capture this exciting chapter in our life in a meaningful way where we bring our full expression to the world. And be sure to subscribe to the newsletter, Don't Be Caged by Your Age. I send it out every month with a recap of folks I've chatted with on the podcast, as well as some wonderful resources and some inspiration to help you uncover and discover things about yourself so you can thrive after 65. And of course, I'll have the links to follow Richard everywhere he glows, because this is a man you want to stay in touch with and also read from, his wonderful written words. But I'm also very excited about your masterclass. I didn't know it was virtual. I think that is just outstanding, Richard.
Right.
Thank you so much for joining me on Don't Be Caged by Your Age. It was a real treat to spend time with you and learn from you.
Well, thank you so much. I've had a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing you in Orlando.
I know. Just a few more months, end of April, folks. I'll have the links in the show notes. And listeners, remember, you have so much to give. Don't let those internalized ageist beliefs prevent you from pursuing new dreams and opportunities. You keep glowing. We need you. The world is not done with you yet. And until next time, I'm wishing you a delicious day. Everywhere you glow, cheers from Boston. Bye, everyone. Listeners, I'm so grateful you carved out time to tune in and grab the gems from this delicious conversation. Be sure to hop on over to Don't Be Caged by Your Age on LinkedIn or Instagram to share your thoughts about ageism and unretirement. Because in this space, your age doesn't define you, it refines you. If you are inspired by a story you hear, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe, share, rate, and review the podcast. To receive an alert whenever a new show is posted, please join the Don't Be Caged by Your Age newsletter. Every month, you'll receive links to the podcast and helpful resources for creating possibilities for your unretirement days. Thank you for tuning in. I am so excited to hear how you found ways to thrive after 65. Waving from Boston, cheers.